I said some crazy stuff that might freak people out. I said, look, if you don't want a global trade show, I won't put on a global trade show. Do you know how hard it is and expensive it is to put on a global trade show? Do you know how many people like work tirelessly? It kills us. We do it because our industry wants it and needs it. And if that want and need changes, we'll do something else. And I said, what do you want? They said, oh, we need to gather. I said, okay, like in Anaheim in Southern California every January? Yes. Okay, great. I can do that for you.
I'm very pleased to have John Mlynczak as this week's guest on Life with Strings Attached. John is the president and CEO of NAMM, the National Association of Music Merchants, an association with a history of more than 120 years and best known for producing the largest musical instrument show in the world with a record attendance of more than 117,000 attendees from all over the world. With expertise in the music industry, education, technology, and leadership, he previously worked as the Vice President of Music Education and Technology at Hal Leonard and was the Director of Education at PreSonus Audio. John has held positions at Vandercook College, Massachusetts Music Educators Association, and served on advocacy committees. He is a certified Google Level 2 educator and frequently speaks on education technology and music advocacy. As a musician, he plays trumpet in the Met Winds and has performed in various ensembles. John earned a bachelor's degree in music education from Virginia Commonwealth University and master's degrees in both music performance and education leadership from Louisiana State University. I thoroughly enjoyed my conversation with John Mlynczak. I hope that you do as much as I did. So John, thank you for being on Life with Strings Attached. How are things there in San Diego?
Great. It's so good to be here, Jamie. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm very excited to talk with you. As you can see, we're in sunny San Diego. It is end of October, and we are in the heart of our sunshine time, so things are good.
Wait a second. The heart of your sunshine time is all the time, isn't it? You get like 27 days of rain or something.
Well, on the coast, we get like this weird June gloom, May grayish, and It was like marine layer fog a couple weeks ago. We had a whole week without sunshine. And let me tell you, like people were losing their mind around here. Like literally a week of marine layer. Like you'd have thought, they're like, why do I pay taxes? No sunshine.
That's hilarious.
Tax, right? So,
our tech Zach lives in Strasbourg, France, which has a fair amount of gloom to it. I'm sure he's just sitting there shaking his head. 1 week of fog? Are you kidding me?
I was actually traveling, but I heard about it. It was not good.
Right. Yeah, actually, you just came back from Shanghai, did you not?
Yes, Shanghai, and then I did a quick trip to Sydney, Australia after.
Great. You know, the Shanghai show is probably the only substantial global show that I have not attended in person. Have you been there multiple times? Is it your first time there? Or?
It's my second time in the Shanghai show. I've been involved with many companies attending and like the strategy behind it. Yeah, I mean, it's a really strong show for the Chinese domestic market. That's really the heart of the show. It's 80% of attendees are actually like local, like, within like Shanghai radius to drive in or come in. But you do get a really strong showing of some European suppliers meeting with their contract manufacturers. That's another big value part of it there.
Yeah. I had lots of colleagues and friends who were there with you. And someday in the future, I'm sure I'll make it there. How does, maybe I'm diving too deep here right from the beginning, but it's just where you were. It's just the time. So I'm curious, for me, I know you've been traveling quite a bit actually this last year, and you've been meeting with a lot of trade organizations and such around the world. And, one of the things I think is often misunderstood about NAMM in general is, as I'm sure you're very well aware of, is NAMM is seen as this big show that happens in January in California, and you do so much more work than that. And I think that if you travel, they think you're probably trying to get people to the show, and maybe you are. But is that why you were going? Is there something else to it? It is the National Association of Music Merchants. What is your relationship with the music industry globally? Is it all about the show, or is there something more going on there?
What a great question. Honestly, first and foremost, we are we are a global association. Like, yes, we're based in California. We're actually nonprofit registered in New York, based in California, if you want to get way deep in the charter. But, we are a global association, and we act that way. And we are, quite frankly, the global uniter of the music industry. Every industry needs someone to just bring them together and to make sure that we're all talking, make sure that all of our collective issues and opportunities are addressed at the, of course we do a lot in the US government, but at the global scale, there are things that an industry association like NAMM can do on behalf of thousands of members and hundreds of thousands of employees worldwide that an individual company or even a collection of a few individual companies just can't accomplish. So we are known as the largest global music products trade show in the world. Like, we're absolutely that, but we are that trade show because we are an association that unites the industry. Like, our first goal is we exist to strengthen the music products industry. That is our mission. We're a nonprofit C6 membership association and a nonprofit C3 charitable foundation combined into one. And again, our number one, we're traveling. I mean, sure, we'll talk about the NAMM Show. I don't talk about the NAMM Show that much on travels. We usually go, we gather members, we get suppliers, wholesalers, retailers, enthusiasts, artists, all these influencers, like all these audiences that gather at the NAMM Show. We're traveling the world, gathering them locally, helping people talk, helping them talk about how to grow our industry. And we learn a lot. Like, I learned so much. One of my favorite parts of the job is I hear firsthand what's going on in our industry and what the nuances in Europe versus Japan versus China versus Australia versus US versus Latin America, and what the common themes are and how business in one part of the world affects another part of the world. So yeah, what folks don't realize is NAMM works like every day. We are just as busy every day of the year than we are at the NAMM Show, constantly thinking about how we strengthen this industry. And we do that by getting this industry to talk to each other in a meaningful way.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that's mostly true. I'm not sure you're exactly as busy as you are every day at the NAMM Show. I think you get retired directly after the show. But I get the sentiment of what you're saying.
Yeah. So definitely not logging as many steps, that's for sure. Maybe more airline miles, but not as many steps.
Yeah. So, I often refer to myself as professionally curious. And so I'm super curious about when you say you love learning about those different cultures and the nuances of it. Have there been some really inspiring things that you've learned about the other cultures, or something that just sort of blew your mind? You haven't been able to get it out of your head?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think the first learning is that, you asked about people, your question about, is it NAMM? It's the National Association. Some people think it's North American. It's National Association of Music Merchants, but we're absolutely global. I mean, 30% of our membership is registered global, meaning their home address is outside the US. But if you take the companies like, Fender Musical Instruments Corporation, FMIC, is registered in LA. Are they not a global company?
Right.
Gibson is registered in Nashville. Are they not a global company? You can go on and on and on. So when you actually look at how our companies operate, we're absolutely global. And and some of the things that constantly blow my mind is how, in the world today, when some economic situation in Europe, how that impacts retailers and suppliers and what that does with inventory and strategies in other parts of the world. It actually does have effects. And, you look at the domestic market in China right now, there is a decline in, local domestic sales of products in China. The effect it's having on the piano industry is quite large when, that's traditionally a lot of percentage of sales. And so it's amazing when you see, we have to understand globally because global forces impact. I mean, obviously we have two global conflicts right now with, Russia, Ukraine, and what's happening with Israel and Gaza. Those have impacts all over the world on consumer spending, confidence, energy prices. all of that affects our industry. And so the more we can help companies understand like how these forces will affect our industry and how we can prepare and work together to keep music making happening is valuable. The thing that always blows my mind, in the US, we have such a strong, anywhere from 48 to 52% of all global sales are in the US, depending on what data you look at. So we're half the market in the US. And we have strong retail, we have strong culture of music making, we have a strong economy right now, like all those forces. But when you leave the US and you go to, and I won't, mention any particular countries, there's 20 I could mention, but if you go to someone that might be an emerging country or, not the US market, the desire and passion for music making that comes culturally in places is absolutely infectious. And to see certain markets where we don't have don't have strong school music. The US has such strong school music, and NAMM advocates and lobbies so hard to retain that, and our partners at NESMD and all of that. But in other places, there is no school music. And so my biggest takeaway sometimes is, how do people learn? How do you start music if you don't have that like school program, or you don't have these amazing franchises like School of Rock or programs like Little Kids or Music Will now that are out there, teaching people to play guitar and all that. There's places like the desire for music making is universal. And to see how people at any age go to say, I want to play music, and they might go to YouTube, or they might go to their local store, which is a community center for local hub of musicians. Just the way music making happens in different cultures is very different, but the desire for humans to make music under any economic circumstance or any cultural circumstance is so incredibly strong. And I think we can take learnings from places that we might look at and say, oh, well, that's a, third world or second world country, or that's emerging, culture, whatever. There's some really incredible music making happening that we could always take lessons from. So I think just looking at all the different markets and helping us all learn from everyone's innovation.
Yeah. The approach to music, which instrumentation is normal, where they're from, where music is played. Is it played in the home? Is music made in a communal sense? Is it made within their houses of worship? Is it made in the streets? Is there a some sort of institution built around them? So I'm in the area where Puccini is from right now. I'm in Tuscany right now. And he wrote the Bohème and Madame Butterfly in a little villa up on the hill right over there.
Oh my gosh.
And so there's a great deal of pride, and there's a great deal of investment in making sure that people know about opera and know about Puccini here, because it's part of the history of the place. And so everybody here knows about Puccini. But I couldn't have that same conversation in Philadelphia or Toronto. Not everybody would know who Puccini is there, right? And they have a different set of people whom they know about. And a few weeks back, I was in Bavaria, and I attended a beer fest for the first time, and they were playing their Blas music, their brass music. And I got to tell you, I was blown away by those guys playing the brass music, which to me is a cultural sort of distant sort of sound, but their musicianship was fantastic, and they're playing in a beer tent. It's not like they were playing in a grand sort of symphony hall. This was not the most exceptional of Blas music. It was kind of I'm sure they were the best local bands, but the point is, it was an example of what Blas music is in Bavaria. And it was a completely different feel to what we're experiencing, when there's someone playing mandolin in the town hall here, or the town square every Sunday here. There's someone just gets out there and plays mandolin through an amplifier, but it's the bowl-back mandolin, the historical mandolin of the old world, not the bluegrass mandolin that we think of when we're in North America, right? And I know I did a little bit of research on you, John, and I know you grew up in Richmond, which is bluegrass country, you know, sort of. Depends on if you were in the city or whether you were sort of in the burbs or out, you know, but. And then you went from there, and you were in Boston, and you were in Louisiana. I mean, these are very substantial musical cultural differences. I think if you're not from America, or at least from North America, I don't think people understand the really substantial. Those are like different countries, culturally speaking. Those are different countries. Moving
from Louisiana to Boston, Massachusetts, I might as well move from Shanghai to Berlin.
Right.
And no, I love that you're talking like community music making. Music is cultural. The number one force of driving music making is cultural. And like, of course, as a trumpet player, like I love the German brass instruments and what you see in Bavaria, and you see like there's instruments that are manufactured and built by incredible craftspeople that are specific to these type of brass bands that you just don't see in the U.S. And a lot of these incredible instruments are, they're not mass produced and they're not put out like the B-flat trumpet is today, but they're just incredible, beautiful instruments. And people have a culture of playing it. And I'm a huge classical music fan, so I always say like nobody could create emotion better than Puccini. Like the 3 hours of La Bohème, which is one of my favorite operas of all time, by the way. The entire, like every time she coughs, we feel like angst and like incredible, like, oh God, Mimi, you're gonna, oh no, but how are we so invested in Mimi? In the first 10 minutes, somehow we are so invested in this love story. They meet, they touch hands, the candlelight, and then all of a sudden we get the first aria, and now we are emotionally invested in two people's love who didn't know each other 10 minutes ago for the next 2 hours and 50 minutes. Nothing else in the world but music could create that moment. And that's what's so beautiful about Puccini. And that's why like I think we should all be, students of the art form of music and just learn everywhere we go. Because it's cultural. I mean, you go to Brazil. I loved my time in Brazil. I mean, you talk about a culture of just walk through the park and there's samba and it's just bossa nova, it's everywhere. It's in people's like soul,
Music starts around a Brazilian and they can't help but they start to dance. Their big smiles get up. Like they are not the conservative sort of culture that we have in North America in the same way. They're right into it right away, and so it's really remarkable.
There's something special, and like I have multiple degrees. I studied music through school. I've done played professionally. I've done the juries. I've taught lessons, all of that. So I'm not discounting the true study of music and what I'm about to say. But there is something magical about music learning in a culture that is organic, that is not academic, that is not, oh, you want to learn this instrument? Okay, we'll go to buy this etude. You got to study. You got to play these rite of passage pieces. You got to do these studies. You just go to a cultural center and you listen and you learn. And there's this interesting, like, you ask someone if you're a musician, it's like asking a golfer, do you play golf? Do you play music? Kind of, I'm not that good. I mean, I own a couple guitars, but don't ask me to play anything. It's this sort of like apologetic answer to the question.
Yeah.
Whereas in some calls, like, yes, I'm a musician, and they pick up an instrument and like, it might not be perfectly in tune. It might not be academically right, but it is fun and joyous. And people drink and dance and love. And like, that's something I think we could take as a lesson too. I mean, my dream is you ask people, if you're a musician, if you can play a note, if you could sing a note, if you could hear in tune versus out of tune, if you just enjoy music, you're a musician. Say yes.
Yeah, sure.
I am a musician. Doesn't mean you have to get up on stage and perform something. No one's judging you. But I think more people discount themselves as musicians when, in fact, we are a very musical culture. We're just afraid to admit.
Oh, no. I think that there's lots of music happening in the U.S., but it's there's lots of songs about wallflowers. There's lots of songs about people not getting onto the dance floor. And I don't know that it happens in Brazil. That's all I'm saying. Like, I think music starts playing. There's nobody not dancing except for maybe an awkward guy like me standing off to the side going, isn't this amazing? Not dancing,
Yeah, exactly. I definitely
enjoying watching everyone else dance. And that's a wonderful part. And so, I've thought about this conversation a bit and how not to make it like a big commercial, to be honest. I'm a big fan of NAMM. Actually, in full disclosure, I should say, for the audience who doesn't know, that I have been a consultant to NAMM. I've had a contract with NAMM for years, since 2016 at this point in time. I still have a contract with NAMM. It's mostly around the Boutique Guitar Showcase. There are a few other hours that are baked into that contract about some other sort of advisory work and such, but I think in the modern world, we're supposed to say that when people are listening to a conversation between two people.
Yeah, you're not contractually obligated to say anything in this conversation.
No, I'm not. Yeah, it's not a sneak attack or anything, but it's also not a commercial. But I do have to say, though, that I've been a firm believer in what NAMM does, since my first NAMM show, which is at this point in time, I think was 2001. So it's almost 25 years of NAMM shows at this point. And I've never attended a NAMM show where I felt like, oh, why did I go there? But I boldly tell people, if you come to a NAMM show and you don't do business, it's not the show. Sorry. You can't put me in a room of 100,000 people who are excited, who paid to be there, who want to do business, who want musical instruments, who want to engage, and you don't make something happen. That's on you. Sorry. I don't mean blame, but address what you're doing. Think about how you're doing it, what goals you came there with, how you addressed people, what product you brought, what need it fills, and is there a need for that in the marketplace currently, how you're communicating it. But man, it's the greatest single opportunity to promote your musical instrument or music industry business. That's not the right way to say it. It's not record labels. So music merchants, so those who are producing musical instruments, the buying and selling of musical instruments, the performance musical instruments, it's the only place in the entire world where you can come to one spot and meet the world. The whole world.
100%. And to your point, our job, and our job at NAMM is to make sure that the NAMM show is absolutely representative of the entire world of music making, of music products. And that's why we travel a lot. Of course we meet with folks and we build strong relationships. That's why the NAMM show is valuable, because that face-to-face in-person contact, that's why we travel the globe all year round, meeting with folks. But also back to learning, the more we at NAMM understand what the global music products industry looks like, what the challenges are. And these are still challenging times. There are times when things are thriving. There are times when, you get a mix, and there's times when it's challenging. I think overall we're challenged right now. But that's, we as NAMM, the show has to bring together the entire world. We need all the major players there. We need that opportunity. And when we do our job right, to your point, anyone shows up at the NAMM show and they can make opportunity happen. Like, you come to the NAMM show with a list of what you want to get out of it. You leave the NAMM show with more opportunity than you ever knew existed before you walked in. And that's why we work so hard at making sure the right people are there. Right.
Yes. And, the funny thing about that is that we've recently run an experiment. I have another platform called The Business of Guitar. And in the business of guitar, it's behind a paywall so that we can talk about inside stuff where people maybe shouldn't hear about, But it's on Patreon, and we do interviews sometimes that are not ever meant to be aired. I'm just asking people questions on camera as we travel around the world. And sometimes we ask them, how do you choose a show? And I've asked this in Japan, I've asked it in Montreux and Padua, and I've asked it in Chicago and in Anaheim. And the funny thing is, when you ask somebody how they choose a show, you get a list of a few things that are important to them. When you ask them why they're unhappy with a show, it's a completely different list. You didn't set the expectation. You didn't go into the show trying to achieve these objectives. You were not conscious of trying to make sure you achieved these 5 things that at the end are the 5 things you're complaining about. And I've done it, as I said, across multiple countries, across multiple contents, just to sort of say, this is what I think is happening. am I right? Let's go test it. And so I send out myself and a couple of other people with cameras. We ask these questions. And that's a really difficult thing to deal with. I'm a producer also, a show producer. We do a tour around the world. We do events in 25 cities across 12 countries and 3 continents every year. NAMM Show is one of them. And when you're asking someone what they're looking for, and then afterwards, if they're unhappy for some reason, they give you a completely separate list. I mean, that's hard to deal with.
But here's the thing, we're musicians. I talk, because a lot of the research, like I do personally too, is I look at other industries, I look at other trade shows, but I look at a lot of other industry associations because, we as NAMM are thinking about a global industry. And, our competitors are not just other instruments. I mean, we represent all that. Our competitors are every other thing that a consumer can do with their time, money, and quite frankly, their life. They could do fitness, they could do vacation, they could spend money on luxury items. We are all of those things, by the way, because we are beautiful luxury instruments that take a lot of time and dedication to, like fitness, and are an investment like everything else. So, I look at like what we do, and what always comes to mind in our industry, and everyone who comes from outside our industry is like, you are so different. And I'm like, why? It's because we're music makers. We're passionate. The number one word, we are passionate. So back to people having the 2 lists, I fully embrace it, because as a musician, you go on stage, you have a great show. What do you do when you come off stage? God, I missed this note. The guitar player played. Oh, man, this was off. I got to get this better next time. How was the show? It was great, man. What do you think? Well, I messed up all this. We got to fix this. I mean, that's in our blood. Our blood is to always be critical and think about getting better while having an incredible emotion reaction to what happened. So when we leave the NAMM Show and we get post-show surveys, it was amazing. Why was it amazing? Here's everything that needs to improve. We're like, oh, that's a music maker.
That's a good perspective, John. I've not heard that one before. And you're absolutely right. Anybody who's ever performed music knows exactly that truth about what's happening there. That's fascinating. Cedar Creek Custom Case Shop is your premier fretted instrument custom case maker, and we invite you to create a musical instrument case unlike any other, one that's unique to you. Every Cedar Creek custom case is hand-built by highly skilled craftspeople using only select woods, Prominence Forge hardware, and premium instrument-friendly materials. At Cedar Creek Custom Case Shop, we are dedicated to helping you design the case of your dreams. Find out more at cedarcreekcases.com. For me, I'm trying to minimize the prediction errors. So I find a lot of times that unhappiness or dissatisfaction in your life and your business often just comes from people miscrediting prediction errors. So let me give you an example of this. So artisanal guitar makers, which is a big part of what I do, often say they're behind in production. They're not meeting the goals. Their customers are a little upset because they're late on delivery. But if this has been happening for 4 years, you don't have a production issue. You have a promise issue. You have prediction errors. You're not properly forecasting what you're doing. So and when you walk through it, it's not so complicated because the numbers that they're doing are not so large. And so I remember sitting down with a guitar maker at one point in time, and they thought they were producing 20 guitars a month, 240 guitars a year. And they said, we can't catch up. We're just like, so how many guitars do you make a month? 20. Okay, well, it's 240 a year, right? Yeah. Okay. Is that your computer? Yeah. Let's count your invoices. January 1st, December 31st. I don't care what you say you made. I want to see what invoices you produced. Let's count them. It turns out they had never made more than 17.5 guitars in a month, ever. But they'd been making promises for years based on thinking that they made 20 guitars a month. And it didn't seem like a big deal. 2.5 guitars a month behind. It adds up when you're producing and when you have a 3 or 4 year back order, because most of these guys have such high demand that they are scheduling out for years. And so the thing is, there's all this anxiety and stress that comes along with feeling like you're behind. You're not actually behind. You're just bad at making promises. And that's different. It's substantially different. It's a prediction error. I have a grandson. He's a little more than 1 year old right now. And you watch him as he tries to feed himself. He's getting better at it. But, they reach out to get something. They go right past it. And they try it again. And then they get it and they go, or, they try it. And then sometimes it doesn't stay in their face. It comes right back out. But they slowly get better. And what these are a neuroscientist refers to these as prediction errors. You make a judgment as to where it is, you aim for it, and eventually it's no big deal to reach out, pick up a blueberry, put it in your mouth, and it all goes perfectly fine. But in our business and our relationships, we have these same things. We're making predictions about what's going to happen. It's one of our greatest features about being a human, right? We have this ability to predict so that our stupid ideas die instead of us, right? And so our ability to predict is what stops wars. It's thinking it through. It's when the thoughts stop and the conversation stops is when the war starts, right? And so it's just a matter of being honest with who you are, where you're at, and saying, do I have, in this case, a production problem or do I have a forecasting problem? And then all the stress changes. It makes things much easier to deal with. The whole supply chain straightens up. But often we're just not asking the right questions. And so now here I go. I'm going to lay this one on you. Asking the right questions has got to be a huge part of what you have to be doing right now. So you've just come in, you're a new CEO after how many years, decades? How long was your predecessor? Joe
22 years.
22 years. So after 2 decades, you're coming in to lead an organization which has more than a century, 120 some odd years at this point in time, I believe,
Since
with the NAMM Show. With NAMM, right? Yeah, okay. Has gone through multiple changes because when it started, it was piano manufacturers, right? It was not the North American Music Merchants. Right. It starts with a piano association, right?
Correct.
And has evolved and evolved and evolved. And the world is not the same world it was 5 minutes ago. And so you must think a great deal about, am I asking the right question? How are you approaching this in this current age as things are changing?
No,
prediction errors.
You're dead on. And, I think back to the prediction error concept is really, really important because what we have to be right now for the industry that's coming out of, a little bit of tumultuous times and trying to restabilize and figure out what's next, we have to be honest. We can't push our industry and give false promises. We can't create, hope. Hope is not a strategy. And some people try to run business off hope, but that's not a strategy. I think, be honest. And, what we want to make the NAMM Show, our commitment to the industry is being honest with what we are learning and listening, what we're producing, honest with how, the size we want the show. We want an honest show that truly represents the music industry and gives everyone in the industry the opportunity to be successful in the future. And, January is a springboard to the future year, and we need people come to NAMM to understand the state of the industry for that year. And, we're not in this like, everything's great, we're going to be so big, everyone's back. We're pushing that way, but we want to be honest. And I appreciate that point. Back to the right questions. I absolutely, my first order of business, NAMM has good documented history. So I've read, in fact, I just pulled it up yesterday to reread several pages on over the weekend as well for another thing we're working on. We have this documented history since 1901. One of the previous 4 CEOs ago, Bill Gard, it wasn't CEO at the time, it was executive secretary after World War II, and he retired in 1981. When he retired, he took 9 months and compiled the history of everything he could find. It's like 300 typewriter pages, of the history of NAMM from 81. And then we have documentation and board meeting minutes and everything since 81 to now. I read everything. A little bit was like a VCR manual, but I read everything before I officially started. I asked NAMM, I talked to Joe early on when I was announced, what do you need? I said, I need every piece of history. Like, I don't take lightly that I'm picking up a 123-year baton. I can't come in as new guy, new ideas, lots of energy is great, but NAMM is, the whole industry depends on NAMM. So what I can't do is be fast, be reactionary, or break anything. I have to be careful, thoughtful. And, our goal as NAMM is to serve the industry, not sell the industry. We don't approach, and I know you know this from your contract, we don't approach people and try to sell them on why they need a trade show. We don't approach them in necessarily and sell them on why they need to join NAMM because the benefits we offer for them as an association have value. We approach it as, this is what we're doing for you. Is it what we should be doing? What else do you need? What do you need to make your brand successful? Yes, that might be booth space with carpet and electrical and signage and sponsorship, but we're not selling the company on that. We're serving them by giving them a platform to help their product. So I think the most important question to me is, how do we serve you? And I'll just jump right into it. 2 years ago, when I started, I literally had people call me and say, John, you're going to move across the country and move your family and your life? Like, NAMM's dead. No, there's no need for NAMM. There's COVID, blah, blah, blah. I mean, there was a very small percentage of people, but it was a loud percentage of people, which the smallest percentage to be the loudest.
Yeah.
And I never believed that. I mean, obviously, I took the gig. I knew what I was signing up for. But the first question was go to literally everyone who was questioning the value of NAMM as an association or questioning the value of trade shows overall. Just saying, what do you need? Well, and the conversations were interesting because they all assumed I was coming in to sell NAMM. And, well, of course, the new CEO wants to talk to me and talk about why I should be at the NAMM show. But I created a lot of trust, and I think I took a lot of people off guard because I really, at the time, wanted to understand, what do you need from an industry association? You're a company in the industry. I'm not anymore. I worked at many companies in the industry, but you're a number one leading player in our industry. What do you need from a global association to help our industry and your business thrive? And that question, I think, was the right question because it completely deflected, like, wait, you're not trying to sell the NAMM show. I said, look, if you don't want me, and this is, I'll say it here on your podcast, I said some crazy stuff that might freak people out. I said, look, if you don't want a global trade show, I won't put on a global trade show. Do you know how hard it is and expensive it is to put on a global trade show? Do you know how many people work tirelessly? It kills us. We do it because our industry wants it and needs it. And if that want and need changes, we'll do something else. And I said, what do you want? They said, we need to gather. I said, okay, in Anaheim in Southern California every January? Yes. Okay, great. I can do that for you. Now, what do you need from that? Well, I don't need a big expensive booth like we did in the past. I said, okay, what do you need? Talk about, who do you want to reach? Well, I need influencers. I need brand exposure. I need media. I need private room to meet with my key distributors and buyers, but I also need brand exposure. Okay, we could start using the rooms on the second and third floor in different ways. We could recraft sponsorship opportunities. We could give you stage time for artists. Let's recraft this thing. And the NAMM show in 25 will look very different than the NAMM show in 23 and the NAMM show in 2020. It has to, because we are asking brands and having long, detailed conversations, operations, business development, marketing. We're in the weeds with companies, marketing and trade show and sales departments saying, let's strategize. We're not just a product you buy. We're a strategy partner now. And that's the transition that NAMM's made. We just reorganized to a business development department. We're, bringing in more personnel in that department and training them to every person in this industry will have an account executive at NAMM that intimately knows their business. And so for Fretted, we'll have someone's job will be Fretted. Grow this segment. And that's the boutique manufacturers, that's the big brands, that's the buyers, that's the distributors, that's the accessories, that's the artist. We have to know the ecosystem that grows that. So you're right. The questions I've been asking is, what do you need from a global association? What can we do as a global association that you can't do by yourself? And it's funny, everyone came back to give us services that help strengthen our business, reinvest in the industry, and create more music makers philanthropically, and gather us annually so we can meet and kick off our year and do things in person and have brand exposure in 5 days that we can't get anywhere else. And we said, great, we can do that. We have a NAMM show, we have member services, we have a foundation. And that turned out to be the right question.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And music to my ears. So I just recorded a series on sales strategies because I get asked a lot by guitar makers about sales strategies. And you're already doing it. The first video starts off with, all right, so sales strategies. I have some good news for you. It's not about selling. It's about taking care of needs. You simply have to identify what their needs are, align yourself with the people who need what you have. Now, if you can't identify anyone who needs what you have, then you need to go see our unique selling proposition video and redesign. Well, but that's it, man. It's just about taking care of needs. It's people will take care of their own interests. I mean, it's one of the first observations of modern economics, is you can reliably count on people to take care of their own interests rather than hope for their benevolence. And nobody owes you to buy your product. You have to be taking care of someone else's needs other than your own. And so to hear you going out to our whole industry and asking them what their needs are is music to my ears, John. Good on you.
Well, I appreciate it. I think for a lot of me, it's like I was a musician and a teacher first. I don't have an MBA. I have a music ed degree. I have an education administration degree. And I think a lot like this. I just find myself thinking like an educator. And I learned, I think there's Daniel Pink has a great book, To Sell is Human. It was the first book I read when I got in the industry, because I had this when I left teaching and started, I started an education division at Presonus. So I was still in education. But I had this huge, there's kind of dots on your life timeline of I'm leaving teaching, I'm selling out, I'm going into, but I realized very quickly at my first NAMM show that everything you look around the NAMM show, what's happening in booths, what's happening outside of booth, it's educating. And we have to realize, us as an industry, you sell a nice watch. I'll just be very honest. You want to be a salesperson, go sell a luxury item. You need this. You're convincing people. You're trying to get their emotion. You're getting in their head. You're trying to get, FOMO and all of this and status. You sell a nice watch. That consumer doesn't have to learn to play a nice watch. They don't have to say, I'm a watch wearer. We are not selling beautiful guitars. We're selling the dream of I am a guitarist. I am a musician. I identify like that to my peers, to my family. And I'm a musician who wants something very special. I want my sound to be handcrafted in a very special way, customized. And every time I look and touch this wood and these strings, it's part of my identity of what people see and hear of my sound and my brand. When we as an industry realize that that's what we're selling, we're specialized. And this is where our industry is changing right now, because I think the other thing that NAMM has to do is look ahead in decades. Our companies are looking in quarters and year over year. We have to look decade over decade. And where we're going as an industry is we're specialized. We're not going to be fast and cheap. You want a cheap instrument and you want to deliver within 4 hours, you can go online and I don't have to tell you where, and you can get that. And if that's what you want to do, play music, more music makers anywhere helps people everywhere. So that's great. But if you want to become a musician, if you want to really invest, if you want your child to invest, you go to music retail, you come to our channels, that we are a specialized industry that creates musicians. And we have to remember that. And we can't as an industry succumb to we just have to be fast and cheap to survive. No, we have to be specialized and nurturing to survive. And that's why we have 5 days of education at the NAMM Show now. We have 3 days of exhibits, and Sunday was always a half day. That at best. As far as success of how many people showed up on Sunday, most executives had left. Everyone's trying to get home. They're tired. We have 3 jam-packed days of exhibits at the NAMM Show. We have 5 days of education, networking, business education, and that's what our industry needs right now. And so we're just modeling, we're filling the need. We're listening and we're filling the need.
Why? Where does this come from? Who is this John guy who cares about these people? So hang on a second. Let's back this up. So we already established that you sold out of teaching, that you're a corporate sellout, right? That's part of your identity. Yeah.
Complete sellout.
You started in Richmond. you went from Richmond. I identified 4 places, but I don't remember the chronology. And so
Richmond to Louisiana. Yeah.
Yeah. Richmond to Louisiana. And
to LSU for trumpet masters.
So you grew up, all of your formative years were in the Richmond area, is that right?
Yeah, I went to VCU, Virginia Commonwealth for undergrad, played music in Richmond. Richmond's a happening place.
Were you a child in Richmond? Place. Were you a child there? You were. So
born
and raised in Richmond. Okay. Yeah. And then once you went to college, I went
to undergrad in Richmond, and then I went to grad school in Louisiana. I went to LSU, fantastic music program, great trumpet teacher, got a music scholarship, went on down to LSU and, started playing music and teaching music and lived there for, met the PreSonus people. And that's why, again, I didn't know PreSonus audio was in, but I was using PreSonus products, and I had to actually get a repair on something because I think I jammed a preamp or something and broke something. My seventh preamp on my FirePod was out, and I sent it to repair, and I printed the ticket. I'm like,
Baton Rouge,
Florida Avenue, Baton Rouge. Like, this is a mile from where I teach.
Yeah.
So you start talking to people and you get involved through different channels. Next thing you know, you work there.
Yeah. So, all right. Now maybe this is too personal. You can tell me none of your business, but
no. Let's get into it. Let's get into the real stuff.
So John is born of 2 people, I presume, just like the rest of us, and it's in Richmond, Virginia. And I think you're right that Richmond, Virginia is a little understood environment, because Richmond is the South, but it's also Washington. It's right sort of, it's this sort of duality, right on the edge. And so can you maybe give us a little bit of your background and those moments that maybe if that moment didn't happen, that you might not be the John who's doing what he's doing today. Those things. I'll give you an example. People ask me how I move around all the time and how I travel as much. Don't you miss home? I've lived in more than 40 residences in my life. I'm 48 years old. I've lived in 40 different places. My sense of home is my wife and my children. It's my family. And so if you don't understand that Jamie went to 2 schools a year for much of his life as a child, and that he always moved, you might not understand how it's so easy for Jamie to get up and pick up and meet people and go places. And so that's a part of my formation of who I am. And so what are those sort of fundamental sort of moments that built the character of John that we see today? Is that okay to ask that question?
Oh, look, man, I'm happy to have this conversation here, and I'm happy to sit down with you sometime and have it on a much deeper level. I think we have a lot in common here. I think a real formative moment for me, growing up, I grew up a fighter, and, I had to grow up. I grew up as a kid that, my family didn't have a lot of money, weren't well educated. Parents did everything they can. The kids got everything. But, I definitely, even in elementary school, could calculate tax because I knew how many pennies we had to find to buy something to eat for I was one of the, so working since I was 14, counting every penny, just going through, I grew up in that way. And there's nothing, it's a lot of character, but I knew if I was going to go to college, I had to work for it. If I wanted anything, you work for it. And so I think, and the music was no different. And I think my first taste of success was, I got first chair trumpet in the all county, whatever. I'm really good at this. And you get some praise, and you go and, you start working hard and practicing a lot, and you start getting the thrill of work hard, get good results. And again, that just drove. I never questioned, I'm going to music school. I'm going to grad school. I'm going to be the best trumpet player in the world ever. Now, all trumpet players say that because we're all little head cases. But there was a big drive there. And I'll tell you, so that's one piece of it, but the pendulum swung too far. And I became I am the best. I'm a fighter. You didn't work as hard as me. If I go in a gig and someone played better than me, I'm going to go back in the practice room and I'm going to just beat myself up until I'm better than them, and I'm going to come out. And you just get that drive. And you get too much wrapped up in that. And I definitely became one of those trumpet players that was literally, I'm better than you. And if I'm not better, if you do anything better than me, I will go figure out how to play higher, faster, louder, no matter what, because I'm going to be the best. And I was scholarshiped. I was first chair in my ensemble in my second semester of undergrad. I was first chair. I was scholarshiped to go to school. Like but that gets to your head. And I'll tell you, you get to a point where like you're first chair, you're leading sectionals, you're leading ensembles, you're always the leader, but you're always the leader because you're the best. And there was a moment, and it was teaching. It was teaching elementary students and middle school students and the teachers around me that, and just the sort of like culture of like kindness. I mean, the South is a lot of things, but it is loving. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, you will do anything for your neighbor. And so there's this very loving, like, culture that I got to teach in, where we like cared deeply for the students. And the school I was at had a different culture. And if a student has a bad day, you don't punish them. You figure out what's going on with the family. What's going on that's making this student react? And that was the culture I taught in. So I come in hot-headed, fully scholarship, best trumpet player around, look at me, blah, blah, blah. And I just got smacked in the face by trying to teach these kids, you're going to be better. You're going to push, go. And I, bumped into some stuff. And I think I learned a really beautiful lesson that's like, yes, I am the top and the leader of everything, but the people under me, big quotes under me, because I don't believe anyone was under me at the time I did, they didn't want me to be their leader. I was just their leader because I was the best. And when you start trying to get, 8-year-olds to do something, they don't care how good you are. They don't. They care because they want to like follow you. They want to be motivated by you. And there was a formative moment as a leader that you figure out that's like, it's a lot easier to lead when people want you to be their leader. And that transition happened through teaching, started gigging more, because again, people, you play on the gig, you play 30 minutes, an hour. If it's a, wedding reception, you're jamming for 3 or 4 hours, but you're hanging out with those people all the time. And you have to be someone that cares about people and cares about their success. And I learned, I had a really great college professor that smacked me down several times. And I didn't get it at the time, but then a few years later, some of the things that my VCU professors were smacking me for started making sense a couple years later. And I went back and thanked him. I said, I wasn't ready for what you were trying to tell me, but now I get it. In that if I just reapproached my leadership as helping the section play better, not saying play like me, follow me, match my pitch, match my phrasing, match my articulation. Why aren't you matching me? I'm first chair, darn it. Listen to me. But invest more time in like listening to them and like making them better players. As a trumpet player, I started sitting on top of the section because they're playing beautifully. I'm not dragging them along. I'm sitting on top of a section playing beautifully. My endurance got better. My sound got better because as musicians, especially trumpet players, I've given this talk before, we play a little sharp and we play a little ahead because we feel like we have to lead. So we have to hear our sound amongst the section and we have to push a little bit so everyone knows we're pulling them along. When you invest in your section and just let them play beautifully and you sit within it to the point where you can't actually hear yourself, wow, does it unlock everything. And you take that forward to business. I mean, that's the pivotal moment. Like, this industry doesn't need John Mlynczak to drag them along. This industry doesn't need John Mlynczak's ideas. You need someone that's going to listen. This building, the 62 people at NAMM need someone that supports them and to make them better people. Because at the end of the day, you learn when you're conducting an ensemble, you learn a hard lesson. Like, all the players are facing the audience and making the music. Your rear end is to the audience. It actually doesn't matter. You're not playing anymore. You're not doing anything. You have to make the people in front of you be their best selves. Then you take the bow, which is really unfair because it's the people on stage that did it. That's how I think of myself right now. That's the formative moment that I think a lot about leadership, because I have to be a strong leader. It's not about me dragging and kicking and screaming and forcing people. It's about me investing in people. And it's the same with our companies. It's the same with our industry. It's the same with the NAMM staff. And then they want you to be their leader because you genuinely care about their success. It's a lot easier that way. But man, was I the opposite for a while. and I got smacked down. I learned you get so much success by being a jerk and being the best. And you see people today and you see that. And I was like, I wish I could just help you. Like, yes, I know, but it plateaus. There is a hard ceiling to being the best and making people follow you because you're quote unquote better than them. There is a ceiling to that strategy.
Yeah. I've been in the shoe on the other foot scenario. And part of it was when I was a retailer at one point in time. I had a music store in the Toronto area for many years. But later on, I ended up doing distribution and getting out on the road. And I've been in every state, every province. I've been in more than 600 guitar shops in the U.S. alone. And I realized, I used to treat people like this. Doesn't feel good. Man, I was a jerk. You want
to go back and smack the 27-year-old version of yourself along the head. Like,
yeah, exactly. And you get it. There's a bit of there can be a defensiveness because someone is trying to sell you for their interests. Sometimes they're not trying to take care of my needs. It wasn't you walking in and saying, Jim, what do you need? No need, no problem. No. They were there with their book. They were going to sell some stuff, right? And so then you get into this sparring relationship, and that's part of that was, I guess, me responding a bit to that sparring sort of thing. But, the older, hopefully wiser version of Jamie would have taken that same sales guy and had a different conversation today than I did back then. And as I travel around the country, there's quite different relations with that, and getting the nuances of understanding how to deal with that. Actually, where you're initially from, and in the south of the U.S., there's something I don't still understand quite honestly, that the owners of the shop are kept a bit arm's length away from you if you're in a selling position, and it's like everybody on the phone is meant to play defense. So you don't get to the quarterback, which doesn't happen anywhere else. Actually, it just happens
in the South. Are quite aligned, my friend.
Well, yeah, sure, but but they would tell you the same thing in Oklahoma and in Texas, in the West and such. But it's a different thing, and I've never blamed them for it. I've always thought, I don't yet understand this thing. I don't understand how to make this work as well as it could work, and I'm not here to get something from you. I'm here to see if you need what I have. I won't know. No need, no problem. And we'll move on, but I might have something that you actually need because I try and align myself with things that take care of legitimate needs. And that takes all the stress out of it for me. When I was selling things, it was like, if this took care of a need that something else didn't, if this did something so well, I remember being in a scenario where I made an appointment in Austin, Texas, and I showed up at the store, and the guy, I got there and said, I'm super busy today. You got 10 minutes? I said, 10 minutes? I came from Toronto. He said, sorry, man, you're busy. I said, all right. And I knew what my product had. At the time, it was a really natural sounding amplified pickup system in a guitar. I said, all right, grab whatever you think is your most natural sounding amplified acoustic and meet me in front of your PA system in 10 minutes. He did. We both plugged him in. My product blew his mind. I got 2 hours with him.
There you go.
But only because I knew what need I was fulfilling. If you got 10 minutes, you ain't got time to work this out. You got to know exactly what you got. And you got to know exactly how to identify, do you need this or not? And if not, it's okay. Move on.
We got to listen to needs. And it's so funny as I think about what does our industry need right now. And, NAMM is an association where we do events year round. We just launched today, October 22nd, we just launched NAMM Next event for the summer. This is a leadership type conference, but our industry needs leadership. Like our industry leaders need to get gathered together and hear from other industries and think about how we, compete for everyone's customer and grow our industry. Now, will we have that need in 10 years? I don't know. People are like, is NAMM Next the new summer NAMM? Well, NAMM Next is what we thought the industry needed in 24. We did it. It was highly successful. We did a small test version. Everyone loved it. So we'll do it again. And if our industry doesn't need it, I'm the first to say, like, I'm not sitting here saying I just created a new event that's going to be my legacy. If our industry doesn't need it in 5 years, I'll kill it. I'm not going to keep dragging on things. If our industry doesn't need, massive, big, multi-structure booths at the NAMM Show, we're not going to promote that. We're going to promote boutique experiences. We're going to promote brand experiences in rooms in the second and third floor, and we're going to promote artists throughout campus. I mean, you have to your point, you have to serve a need. That's the entire thing. You think a lot about, AI today. Everyone's like, oh, AI and Chat GPT. But the idea of a computer, what those do is obviously they take data from all these sources and they make, they predict or they make summations based on all the inputting data. Chat GPT and any AI model is only as good as all the information that's feeding it. It's just learning from what's coming in. We've been doing that as humans for a long time. Like, I'm only as good as the information I'm hearing. And if, to your point, if I don't ask the right questions, and if I don't leave this chair and go out and go to the people who are not the squeaky wheels, I will make wrong predictions based on the data I'm getting. Because as anyone else, the people who get to me, who fight to get to me, are the people that have incredibly high praise or incredibly high problems, perceived problems. And that's great. And I love them all and we'll take care of everything. But everything in the middle, you have to go out and you have to listen to. And we'll make good decisions as NAMM as long as we're listening to the needs of the entire industry, which could be the boutique instrument maker south of France that I go to visit, or the major speaker company like L Acoustics that I'll go to visit, or everything in between. Every guitar factory, we try to just get a real representation of the need.
Are you serious about the business of guitar? Then you need to join us on Patreon. We're building a future where guitar makers are able to live prosperous lives making instruments that inspire the musical experience, which helps to create a more beautiful world, where others who are passionate about the guitar can thrive. Those who help in the promotion and resale, trade shows, writing of books and articles are supported as a valuable part of the community. A community where we explore with curiosity and encourage those around us in their endeavors. With a community effort, we can accomplish far more than we can individually. So let's be serious about your guitar business and join us on Patreon at patreon.com/business of guitar. That's patreon.com/business of guitar. And test them. So I'm sure you know this. You have a bit of a tech background also. I don't mean that to be a slant. I just don't know how much of a tech background. Okay. But I know you have some tech background. And so the thing that a lot of people, I think, underestimate with something like ChatGPT is that the large language models are built on a GAN system. And that GAN system is, for those who don't know, is a generative adversarial network. And so you're not just collecting data, you're testing the data, you're asking the questions, you're adversarial with the information you're getting. And so let me give a quick example for our listeners here. And so the way this works is you have two computer systems. One is a generator and one is a judge. And so one generates, let's say, pictures of flowers. Okay? And its job is to get really good at making pictures of flowers. And so it generates a picture of a flower and it sends it to the judge. But it could also use an existing picture of a flower. And so it sends it and says, I made this. The judge says, that doesn't even look like a flower. No, it's not a flower. And the judge is right. And guess what happens? The judge gets to say the same. But the generator has to evolve and get better at fooling the judge. And so the generator tries again and sends it in. The judge goes, oh, that's a flower. Ah, gotcha. That's not. And so now the generator gets to say the same because it fooled him. And the judge has to get better at judging whether it was right or not. And it's this back and forth between these two systems of this proposition and judgment and then reaction. And so it's this constant sort of back and forth thing. It's like playing music. It's this, we propagate the energy, we listen to it, then we choose how to respond. Right, next note. And certainly as you're jamming or trading off, it's exactly that. And so, there's a lot of amazing things about these large language models that are operating on these GAN systems. And there's a lot to be learned for us, because one of the biggest things that we're learning about ourselves as we are trying to program artificial intelligence is that when we ask it a question and it doesn't give us the results, it did exactly what we asked it to do. The problem is we don't know how to ask the question yet. And so we're learning so much about ourselves as to how we need to communicate in an effective way. We don't just need to say words. We need them to be understood, right? We don't just make a program. We need the program to do what we want it to do. Mm-hmm. And so there's this, asking questions, giving answers. That's not enough. It's asking the questions, testing the answers, going back and forth in this adversarial sort of network. And, it's ironic when I learned about that, because I've been brought into the AI world a bit because the world's first robotic citizen, who was at the NAMM Show, Sophia, a few years back, their objective is to create a benevolent AI that, as opposed to a militant or government control AI. And one of the ways they want to do that is by teaching and working on human values and communicating those through the arts. So Sophia was going to learn to play music, and Sophia was going to learn to paint and do poetry and such. And so because of my work on the icon with the guitar and the more theoretical side of it, I don't mean music theory, I mean the theoretical abstraction side of it, they brought me in to talk about what Sophia playing guitar might look like. And that's when I learned so much about this and realized that one of my roles within my, not just my industry, but my community, is I'm actually that friendly adversary. I'm the adversary who wants you to be better. I'm not trying to beat you up. But my clients, actually keep me on retainer so that their CEOs can contact me once a week or every couple of weeks, whatever it is, to ask me questions so I can be that adversary with them and say, is that true? And ask the questions and test those things. And, often I find that people don't interrogate the information as much as they should. We just accept the answers and we move on. I had a VP of sales of one of these big companies tell me they're not selling things at the NAMM Show. You can't sell at NAMM. Really? You're a very large company. You're very successful in what you do. Later on, in the same conversation, he told me, well, we're sold out for a year. Our guys come with full order books. And so I said, wait a second. You create a scenario where you can't take an order at NAMM, and then you say you can't sell guitars at NAMM, and that NAMM's not a good show because you're not selling guitars? Am I hearing this right? Like this question, this statement just needs to be tested a little bit. And you realize, well, maybe you're perfectly fine. You're sold out. But then saying you didn't have a good show because you don't create any sales, well, that's ridiculous at that point in time. So the question, again.
I like that adversarial piece. I think that's where, and we have to invite that. You're right, because without the adversarial piece, if we get the answers we expect from the questions we ask, you almost get diminishing returns. There's a larger conversation with like how many people, say, hey, I saw this article. I can't believe blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, did you read the article? No, I saw the headline. Well, what did the headline say?
Right.
Oh, the headline was written about how you should feel. So you read 7 words that told you should feel a certain way, and you do, and now you're mad and you're talking about it, but you didn't actually read any of the information. And that's the world in which we live in today. And that's kind of a scary place. But I think we're seeing it some of like the generations of music makers right now that want like instant gratification and some of the, product innovations trying to fulfill that. And I'm a fan of anything that helps people make music, but I'm an extra fan of things that create lifelong music makers. But you're right. Without that adversarial piece, question it, without that judge, it can be dangerous. It's a really, really profound statement. I'm going to sleep on that one for sure.
Yeah. Well, if I really shook you up, you won't sleep on it. Tomorrow morning, you'll be like, I need another coffee. It's Jamie's fault.
Exactly. I'm an all-day coffee drinker and guilty as charged.
Well, John, I think it's time we sort of look towards wrapping up, but I always like to throw it back to my guests at this point and say, hey, listen, if I were a better interviewer, is there a question that you were hoping I might have asked you, or a topic that you wanted to discuss together on this podcast that maybe I failed to ask?
Oh man, this has been one of the most real, enlightened. I'm glad we got into the stuff we got into, because it means a lot to me to be able to talk about this. If I could ask anything or talk about anything, I want, when people talk about NAMM without me or NAMM in the conversation, it's a decades of what NAMM is. My wish is that people would describe NAMM as NAMM is the global association that cares deeply about growing the music products industry and bringing together everyone in the ecosystem of the music products industry. And the NAMM Foundation is out there creating more music makers strategically across our industry. And NAMM is helping businesses succeed through member services and education and research and everything we do to help members be better at business. And the NAMM Show is bringing together leaders of the industry to kick off the year, which to make it as successful as possible. But all of these things are just encompassed in, 62 people in California that sit in a building all day and have really deep, passionate conversations about how do we grow a global industry. That's what I want people to know, what we do. And if you're ever in Southern California, come visit the NAMM office. Especially if you're a member company, we are your office. We're yours. Come to our museum here on the office. Come visit with us, talk to us, because we want everyone just to see and feel what we get to see and feel every day.
That is a great answer. But I've never interviewed a company before. I'm interviewing John. And so, John, how do you want people to remember this interview and you?
I want people to know that we care deeply. We care. And every decision we make, that I make, is about caring for companies. I would not be in this chair if it wasn't for a trumpet bought at a yard sale when I was 13. And I care deeply for the people who make instruments, who sell, who create music makers. It all comes from a place of caring deeply for the industry. And I know that, in my position, in any leadership position, if you're making everyone right, you're not doing it right. So obviously, there's people that see things that I do or NAMM do, and why this, why that. I promise you, nothing I do is an accident. Nothing I do is haphazard. In fact, everything I do, I lose sleep over. I question every detail. It's all intentional, for better or for worse, but it's all intentional from a place of deeply caring about what's going to grow this industry and allow NAMM to do the things that only NAMM can do to grow the industry. And when we say yes, it is a huge yes and a big, bold bet about growing the industry. And when we say no, it's not because we don't love you. It's because we need to say yes to what only NAMM can do. And that's how I operate every day. It comes from a place of deep caring about this industry.
Okay. Well, thank you, John. I appreciate you taking the time today. For those of you listening, John and I are going to talk for another 5 or 10 minutes on our Business of Guitar platform, which you can find on Patreon at patreon.com/business of guitar. Again, that's patreon.com/business of guitar. And if you want to hear about, this guy runs the largest trade organization in the entire world for musical instruments. And so I think he's probably got something to say. If you want to hear it over there. For now, for our regular listeners who are listening to us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or YouTube, John, thank you very much for being on Life with Strings Attached. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you for watching and listening. You can find more episodes wherever you listen to your podcasts. And a special thanks to those who support us on Patreon. It's your support that enables us to do this work.